Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the 108th episode of Stories of Service, Ordinary People Who Do Extraordinary Work. And I am the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And today I have another amazing guest that I'm actually really excited about because anytime I bring you guys an animal advocate or somebody who is in the animal welfare community, I get extra excited because, of course, as you guys all know, that's how I got my start as a advocate. So, Marc Abrahamson. Oh gosh, I know I'm going to get it wrong. Dr. Marc the Vet. How are you doing?
Mark is absolutely fine. Teresa, good evening. How are you? I'm fine.
I'm doing amazing and just so happy to have this opportunity to have you on. I know we're going to just talk about so many different things. I'm going to read you guys a little bit about Marc, and then we're just going to get right into the questions. Marc was, like I said, an instrumental part of my journey as an animal advocate and was part of a law in the UK which banned the sale of pets in storefronts, among other initiatives. He uses his experience as a veterinarian in marketing, persuasion, public relations, and community organizing to promote countless animal causes. Some of this work includes events that promote the human-animal bond and shine a spotlight on animal cruelty. He is really a pet celebrity in the UK, and as it pertains to Marc animal welfare, he is known as Marc the Vet. He uses his extensive knowledge, as I said, about marketing and PR and channels that into activism. And his father was also in the marketing and PR industry. It's mentioned in his book. I have it right here. We'll talk more about it later. Be More Mosquito. He is also, Marc Abraham, OBE, is a multi-award winning practicing vet, author, and animal welfare campaigner. He was born in Brighton, England. We just talked about that, and is well known for successfully leading the Lucy's Law campaign to ban commercial third-party and kitten dealers such as pet shops. He is the secretariat and co-founder of the All-Party Parliamentary Dog Advisory Welfare Group, affectionately known as AppDog, and he visits local schools, chatting to pupils and caring for animals and looking out for one another. Plus enjoys working on the South Downs and supporting Brighton and Hove Albion. In 2022, gosh, yes, my UK pronunciations probably need a little bit of work. I'm sure your colleagues are just rolling their eyes right now. But in 2022, Marc was awarded OBE for services to animal welfare by His Majesty King Charles. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm very happy to be here. And you got most of that pronounced was spot on.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. All right. So first off, I want to ask you what piqued your interest in animals? So, because you're a veterinarian, so what was it that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had very animal-loving parents growing up, and so we always sort of surrounded by pets, usually cats. But at one point, I had a tortoise. And or a turtle, I think, as you guys call them. And the turtle had a little wound in its leg with a little maggot in it, like a blue bottle larvae. And apparently, when I was 3 years old, I dug this little larvae out with a twig in the back garden, and the leg got better and cleaned it up, and the turtle got better. And that was my first sort of experience of making an animal better. And that was kind of it, really. It just took that one event and to be surrounded by animals and to be obsessed with nature and wildlife and playing outside and frog spawn and broken bird eggshells and anything to do with nature. And that piqued my interest. And then I guess I knew about the profession, being a vet or just helping animals, and that's the only thing I ever wanted to do. So it's quite easy. I mean, I do a lot of school visits now, and I ask people, what do you want to do? And half of them don't know. And I find that sad, because I think part of growing up is aiming for something.
Yes.
Rather than kind of not knowing. With so many professions around, I don't know, it just seems weird to me that young people that can't just pick one or two or three and just sort of think, right, I'm going to go for that.
Right. And even if it doesn't work out, they're on a path. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if too many options puts people off deciding on one. I don't know. But I was very lucky. My point is, I was very lucky. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, apparently from 3, so my mum tells me. And then my whole childhood, including teenage years, were quite nerdy and dorky, I guess you Americans call it, because all I wanted to do was become a vet and get into university. So I just studied and studied and studied as much as I possibly could. Didn't really have a social life, and finally got into vet school when I was about 17.
But then your father was a person who worked in branding. Did that also played a part as well? And did you ever think you wanted to go down that same road?
No, funny enough, I mean, he was a creative director, and then sort of got bought out eventually. But he was an artist essentially, and he went to art school, and he was into branding and fonts and logos and concepts, and very successful in the advertising world. It was never a world that I wanted to go into myself. Obviously, there was no animals in it, but the skills I learnt, I guess, by osmosis growing up, about what looks right, simplicity, power of branding, campaigning, weirdly, because obviously advertising is campaigning for people to buy something, and animal welfare campaigning is campaigning for people to maybe sign and share a petition. So you're trying to get people to do something with the resources you have available, and that's usually, when you boil it down, creativity and imagination more than anything. Because as a grassroots campaigner, you don't have any money or resources to do anything else apart from think of things to help get noticed. So it definitely helped, although I wasn't aware of it at the time. And the other thing my dad taught me was chess, and I think I played a lot of chess growing up, and I think chess develops the brain into a kind of a strategic, playing the long game, all these factors that again come up in campaigning. So I didn't know, but he was kind of preparing me to be this campaigner without me having a clue, or he having a clue. I was just surrounded by creativity and that sort of, as I say, the chess brain. And I think that is, looking back, that was one of the most valuable things I could ever have growing up. And my mum loves animals. She still loves animals. So, birds in the garden, simple things like that, getting excited about a nuthatch or a woodpecker on the bird feeder. That I grew up with that. And I think that enthusiasm for animals and empathy, compassion, kindness, also for helping people. My mum's a big helper. All those factors combine into becoming sort of a compassionate, empathetic, caring campaigner.
I just love how you're able to take all those different influences and merge that into your work. And I think that's what really struck me as much as it did about when I found you online. And of course, as my audience might not know, I actually met you before I even moved to the UK, because I was so concerned about bringing Jada in with cropped ears. Unfortunately, she does have cropped ears. I don't believe in it, but I thought that the ban might impact her. But I was assured, and actually the animal protection community really helped me understand that even if the law had been passed, there would have been exemptions, thankfully, for people like myself who through no fault of my own, actually have an older dog who has those issues. But it is one of those rarities that you hold, is that you're able to really pinpoint and identify those influences that you had growing up that took you down this path and actually made your work stronger. Because I think that you could have just been a vet, but because you were able to take the branding that your father had, the love of chess, and I hate to mention the guy, but I sort of sometimes I hate to admit it, follow Andrew Tate, and Andrew Tate is a big chess player, and his father was a chess master, and that is a big influence in his life. When he talks, you can see that played a big part in how he became, this martial arts guy, and all his some of the things that I may not totally agree with, but things that he has become were partially influenced by that, understanding the way things are played and being able to anticipate moves that other people are making first. So that's amazing that you're able to draw all those things in there, and that must help you too when you go talk to kids at school about asking them about who influences them, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really get all these influences until I'd kind of almost come to the end of my campaigning journey and had actually taken a deep breath and looked back. And all of a sudden, these influences kind of made sense. But I wasn't really aware that they'd influenced me while I was doing it. So I sadly never had the conversation with my father about how we were kind of both campaigners, just in different ways, because he'd already sadly passed. But huge influence. My grandma needs a mention as well. She passed away 2 years ago, but she was a Kindertransport Holocaust survivor. So she came back home from school. Parents had been taken to Auschwitz and gassed. She was rounded up. She was too old to get on the trains that were being used to take the kids out of Germany and take them to England, the 10,000 kids on the Kindertransport. So she ducked under the barriers, ran to a fancy dress shop, got a Red Cross nurse's uniform for herself, went back to the station and pretended to be a nurse that was helping evacuate the kids. And that's how she got out. So so she was the only one of 10,000 kids that actually arrived in the UK, age 17, that had no one waiting for her. So, because the famous scene of all the grown-ups who had been assigned kids. So she sort of made her own life from literally nothing. So she went from being hated in Germany to being obviously hated in England, being a young adult German, and being adopted by some Quakers and making a new life. So her mantras really were to never give up and anything's possible. So I had the campaigning side, I had the animal loving side, the chest, don't give up, anything's possible, constantly going when I was full on campaigning. Those were the sort of the buzzwords coming up all the time. So that's why, and I know we'll talk about this, but when you do campaign and you finally find something that you care enough about to do something about it, you do need these default settings in your brain just to keep you going. It's very easy to give up, especially in this world. There's so many obstructions, but it is possible to achieve change, and that change can be tiny. It can be just sharing something on social media, like a petition link to get more signatures, or you can lead a full-on campaign. But there's definitely something that we can all do to try and improve the environment that we're in, whether that's sort of locally, nationally, or internationally, or all three.
How did you make the transition from a practicing veterinarian to, okay, because there's a lot of vets that we would see that would sort of testify on bills that in the United States, but I've never seen somebody go full on advocate like you did. So how did you make that transition?
When I think back, it is like someone else did it. Very, very weird. I think when you're in that campaigning zone, it's like the world is behind a thick piece of perspex and everyone's just getting on with their lives, getting married, having kids, their kids are having kids, and all the time you're sort of just it is a lot of focus and there's a hell of a lot of self-discipline. The moment it happened was the night on duty in my veterinarian, you call it an office, don't you? Here we call it a clinic. But basically all these puppies were coming in dying of a disease called parvovirus, which you have in the States as well, and it's usually puppies being bought from pretty horrible circumstances. So puppy mills, we call them puppy farms here, poor hygiene, and the unvaccinated mothers, and they get these diseases and they can't fight them, and they usually die in agony at about 8 weeks old. So we have these 8 puppies coming in. We managed to save 6, 2 sadly passed, and they all look very similar. So I did a bit of undercover investigation and found the seller a few days later, and I went there and I posed as of someone looking for a puppy, and the seller was a third-party seller, so a dealer essentially, operating legally out of a stable block not far from where I live, and they were buying puppies in from a puppy mill, again a legal puppy mill. Most people think puppy mills are illegal. They're on the whole totally legal. In Wales, which is the sort of the main place where puppy mills are in the rural Wales. So I guess it's something that unfairness is another thing that's a driver for me. If I see witness unfairness, especially to injustice to animals, kind of have to do something about it, or at least try and do something about it.
Sure.
So I started to sort of think, right, well, how do we stop these puppies being born and then dying in agony? B, who knows what state the mothers are in? C, these poor families who are buying these puppies, spending thousands of pounds, and then having to either bury them or treat them in the vets. So I decided that there's only two real ways of choosing a dog or a cat. Obviously rescue, huge fan of rescue, patron of a few rescue charities, or not always appropriate to get a rescue dog. Go to the breeder and see the puppy or the kitten interacting with his or her mum. Simple. Those are the two options. Sure. So, and I didn't know about parliamentary campaigning. I didn't know anything about politics. In fact, I not hated politics, but it was really nothing that ever interested me. We had a program growing up in the 80s here called Spitting Image, which came back again a few years ago, which is like satirical puppets of politicians and celebrities. And I used to watch that with my dad, and that was the only, and everyone watched it. It was a comedy. And that was the only real experience I had with politics. Politics for me was something having to posh, mainly men, in London, somewhere where there's a nice bunch of buildings. And that was it. Because, you know, being science and veterinary, I was biology, chemistry, physics, and that was it. So I didn't really know about politics. So I set up, I was doing a lot of media work at the time. I was TV vet on a few popular shows. So I had a bit of a media profile, which definitely helped. So because of that, I was invited to lots of dog shows, like charity dog shows around the country, to judge like Waggiest Tail and, you know,
sure,
Prettiest Bitch and Child's Best Friend and Golden Oldie, like fun ones. And I just thought, this is a, whatever the weather, these Brits are coming out with their dogs to win a rosette, right? I mean, it's so British. I'm pretty sure you have it in the States too.
Oh, yes. The American Kennel Club, dog shows. I used to show dogs. Yes.
There you go. So so these are sort of novelty crossbreeds. Well, everyone's welcome. I think some of them had a pedigree class. But I was there judging all the silly ones. And I was just a bit obsessed with it because I'd never had a dog growing up. I'd only had cats and a turtle. So this was all new to me, this enthusiasm for dogs. I mean, I was a vet, obviously, but just to see what people do on the weekends, you know, and the pressure, you know, on these kids to win a rosette for their dog and their parents. It's like soccer moms, you call it, right? So anyway, I got a bit obsessed with that and invited to all these sort of dog shows. And I just thought, if we had a dog show that well-known people judge, celebrities, high-profile figures, even politicians, that would pull in the media and raise awareness, change public behavior. And if we kept the messaging simple, if you want to get a dog, you go to rescue or you see the mum interacting with the puppy at the breeder, then that would potentially change behavior. So I did it. So I set up this dog show. We had music. It was so to start with, it was called the World's Biggest Puppy Party, which is a big mouthful, and it didn't really work. I lost an absolute fortune. But the elements were live music. The elements were like exhibitors selling stuff, stalls, food, dog show, and a parade of ex-rescue puppy mill breeding dogs in the middle of the day. So everyone's having the best time. You've got French bulldogs with beautiful collars. You've got chihuahuas wearing clothes, whatever. All these pampered pooches. And then you present the evidence. So everyone's having a good time. And then you bring out the ex-breeding dogs from puppy mills with their teats dragging on the ground, and they're still a little bit shut down. They've got rope scars and broken teeth. Everyone stops. Most people start crying. And that's your awareness bit. This is the evidence. This is why we're here. So we did that. I did that 1 year. As I say, I lost a fortune, but I knew there was something in it. And I tweaked the classes of the dogs to the relevant celebrities. So we have a famous boxer, for example, a famous boxer called Michael Watson who judged, and he judged best boxer. So I was able to tweak everything. The next year, we moved it to like a back garden of a stately home in Brighton. The caliber of celebrity increased. We had quite cool bands playing. again the parade, again the tweaking of the classes to the celebrities. And that just carried on, and we had another one in Brighton, then we had 7 in Primrose Hill. And Primrose Hill is, you may know because you've been in London a year, Primrose Hill next to Regent's Park. It's like where all the celebrities live. So we were able to get Ricky Gervais came, Liam Gallagher came, Sarah Harding, Brian May. Everywhere you looked, there was Elle Macpherson came one year. So what I was keen to do is attract celebrities that would appeal to different demographics. So you'd have the tabloid demographic with the reality TV show stars. You'd have highbrow with Ricky and people like Sue Perkins, Rachel Riley. So every demographic was represented by someone that they'd want to come and see, or that more importantly, the press would want to come and take pictures of. This became really popular. It's called Pup Aid. If anyone listening Googles Pup Aid Primrose Hill, PUPAID, which incidentally was a nod to Live Aid, you'll see all these pictures of the most incredible dog show with this London backdrop skyline. So we did that, and then I realized it was fun. It took a lot of work. There was 2 other people who did it with me, Rebecca and Stuart, who were like the event organizing bit, and I was like fronting it, getting the other people involved, and finding £20,000 every year of sponsorship, which was needed to actually put it on. And yeah, we did this thing, and it became a huge success. We did 10 in all, 3 in Brighton, 7 in London. But it was about on the 4th or 5th one, I realized that we're going to need more than just a dog show every year, even though it was successful and raising a lot of awareness. We needed more. So Caroline Lucas, who's an MP in Brighton, she's the only Green MP, she invited me to Westminster after I'd given her family advice about what dog to get. So that had obviously convinced them to get a rescue dog. They got a rescue Labrador. She was one of the original judges on the first ever dog show in Brighton. And she said, how can I help? So she invited me to Westminster for the first time. And if you remember in Gladiator, when the slaves enter the Colosseum for the first time, and they're looking around, like they literally can't get their heads around it. And that was me walking into Westminster, like, what am I doing here? Yeah. I mean, that was severe imposter syndrome. Now it's minimal imposter syndrome. But then it was crazy. And then the next meeting I had, I won't go through all of them, it was about 300. But the next meeting was with an MP, and I took my mum and my grandma with me because I just didn't know the etiquette, or I was like a tourist.
Were you worried about the agricultural community or because you're a vet, and in the vet community, I know that everyone, there's vets that support the puppy mills, and they go and they provide quote unquote treatment. And in the United States, the veterinarian community is not 100% on board with animal welfare at all times.
I'm well aware of that.
Yes. So how did you combat that in putting together these events? I mean, I'm sure you had those people come out or try to, especially you're having this fun event, and all of a sudden you're showing these very serious puppies that these dogs that need proper care. That had to have pissed some people off.
I mean, I've pissed people off for a long time, and that, the plus side of pissing people off is if you're doing it in a way that you're prioritizing animal welfare, which is pissing them off, then it's good because you're making a difference. Mm-hmm. If you campaigned and didn't piss anyone off, you just wouldn't be a campaigner. That's all part of it. And you're always going to upset vested interests, whether they're industry, whether they're vets involved with puppy mills. But they are definitely the tiny minority of vets in the UK who are complicit, let's say. But on the whole, so then I started my political campaigning career. And as I said, I probably went to Westminster, and I live in Brighton, so I live an hour south of London. So it was, it's a big deal to take every day off, go to London when I was working as a veterinarian. But I must have gone there over 6 years, about 300 times. The last 50 or so meetings were in Number 10 Downing Street, with proper, directors of legislation and people who are genuinely the decision makers. Didn't tell anyone where I was or what I was doing. I'd usually tweet a picture of the House of Commons, usually Big Ben, and say, I'm just here for meetings. And I did it every time. So I could timestamp every visit. but no one knew which part of the parliamentary estate, whether it's the Lords, the Commons, Portcullis House, or 10 Downing Street, I was. And that was a really strategic way of making progress, keeping my supporters, our supporters. I was in a coalition of about 5-6 of us. We've got Linda in Wales and Sue in Wales. We've got Julia in Folkestone. We had Philippa, who sadly passed away in Sheffield. We had Sarah in near Birmingham. So we were all geographically quite separated. But I was kind of fronting it and able to tell our coalition's followers that we were active in Westminster, but not tell our enemies exactly where we were.
What you're doing and what the status was and who you were meeting with and what evidence you were providing.
Yeah.
I read that in the book, that there's those times where you don't want to go public with what you're doing.
Well, I've advised quite a lot of campaigns now, and I say to them, if you do get to 10 Downing Street, which is, I mean, you get starstruck by a front door, 100%. You grow up with it in the news and all the rest of it, but when you see it for the first time, or even second time, or 10th time, or 50th time, it is still there's such a it's such a big deal to be there.
Right.
And I say to campaigners, don't obviously take the picture, but do not share it on social media, because as soon as you're near number 10, people know you're close to the gold. Really, you've potentially almost changed the law, or you're having those final conversations, and that's when the opposition, which is usually industry, ramp it up and will cancel out whatever you're doing. So you're kind of sabotaging your own campaign, which is a shame, because if you've got that far, it's a hell of a lot of work to start cancelling. And I've seen people just ignore my advice, which is fine. I'm only giving it out. And then you see, the opposition ramp it up, which again, as I say, is usually industry, and the campaign falls apart. To resist the temptation to do a lot of things, especially when you're in that environment, is huge. But you just have to play that long game, keep tight, and then you share it when you've done it, and they can't do anything about it.
Right. And that's that's like another chess move when you really think about it.
Yeah, it's the checkmate, really.
Yeah, you've got to be in there and know that while you're there, sometimes not everything that you're saying ought to be public or ought to go to everyone at all times, even your own supporters, because unfortunately it could leak to somebody and then actually sabotage all the hard work that you're doing. And another point that you make in the book and you talk about is that this campaign for Lucy's Law, I mean, I believe it took 10 years. I mean, this was not an overnight success.
It was 10 years. It was 10 years from seeing those puppies coming in to actually changing the law. It was, I think, 11 years for the law actually to be active. But yeah, it was a long time.
It's long. I mean, and it reminds me of like the Carol Baskin. I had her on my podcast, and she passed the Big Cat Public Safety Act, or was part of a coalition, of course, that did that. And then, of course, she had that documentary Tiger King, which, of course, at the time was not so great on her, and really, I don't think portrayed that issue fairly, but. At the same time, it brought a lot of attention to the plight of big cats. And so sometimes that's another thing that we can talk about with campaigning, is sometimes the bad publicity can still work in your advantage if it's channeled correctly.
Channeled correctly is exactly right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many moving parts with campaigning. And I think, as you say, if it's channeled correctly, and one of the ways of channeling stuff correctly is in one word, tone. And I think tone it's so important to get the right tone when you're campaigning. And I've seen it when people go angry and they become trolls, or they just don't position their campaign right. There is a word I'm trying to get. I can't quite think of it, but it's framing.
Yep.
If you frame your campaign right, and you're respectful and you're polite, and you keep things really simple and almost bullet pointed, you will be successful. What people don't respond to is being talked to, as I say, aggressively, or being trolled, or whataboutery. Whataboutery, I mentioned that in the book, and we see that a lot when you say, right, I want to ban puppies and kittens from pet shops, and someone comes through and goes, well, what about rabbits?
Oh,
It's that,
I
and
hate
it's
that.
infuriating
That is
because,
infuriating when people do
well,
that.
I
It's
mean,
just a red herring.
Yeah, Ricky gets it a lot. Ricky Gervais gets it a lot. He'll say, you know, he'll share. I mean, he's brilliant with animal welfare, as everyone knows, and he'll share stuff that's helping animals. And someone will go, "What about the children in Syria?"
Right.
And it's like you can't fit everything in a tweet. But I can list 10 animals that I'm helping in a tweet, and someone will go, "What about hamsters?" Do you know what I mean? There's always someone who will do that, and you forget 99% of stuff is usually good, but it's those annoying ones that you remember.
Well, that's human nature. We tend to
It
focus on the
is
negative, even though there's
so
99
boring.
point. I do the same thing with my comments. I'll get one troll that
Yeah, there you go.
last week that tagged my boss on a post about Israel, and oh my gosh, it just put me in a tailspin, caused me to lose some
There
sleep
you
that
go.
night, and
And
really
on the
99.9% is good.
and on the flip side, you'll be in situations where you'll say, right, we've passed the law to ban third-party puppy and kitten sellers called Lucy's Law. Someone will go, there's still puppy mills, and you go, well, yeah, there's speeding laws, but people still speed. There's murder, I'm pretty sure is still illegal, but people do that. But there is now a framework to investigate and to prosecute and to,
Hold people
so
accountable.
people think, I mean, maybe it's mad really when people do it, but just because you've passed a law, all the criminals will stop the criminal activity. But it's a type of trolling that is so infuriating because you go, you're so wrong, you sound like an idiot, and B, what have you done?
Right.
So, but you don't bite, you just ignore or mute, or I very rarely block, because it means that you've made them relevant. I'm not a big blocker, but I have done a few recently. And it's just like, oh, really? And you just see these people all around maybe the world who are just sitting by their keyboards, just waiting to go to like poking you. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, well, they're keyboard warriors, and
they
again,
are keyboard I hate the word warrior though, because warrior sounds like army
right.
and proud and fighting and defending
they're
something.
just miserable, unhappy
They're
people,
pricks.
and I try my best to have empathy for them, because that helps me feel okay about it. Like I just feel sorry for them, and I just and I try, like I said, with this one particular person, I even tried following up with a back and forth conversation through PM about the fact that she says she's going to report me to my boss, and 12 other people that I work with have all said that I'm toxic, and that I went too far and I should know better, when I was basically just saying this one gentleman, Josh Paul, says that, he used to sell arms to different nations, and said that what we're doing unchecked is not the right thing to do, and we should maybe rethink our strategy about selling arms to countries that have human rights abuses. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. Even as an active duty member in the military. And she just took such umbrage with what I said. And it really kind of got to me, because she kind of tried to take away my freedom of speech. And as an active duty serving member, I still have freedom of speech, as we all do. And so I feel very passionate about that. So to your point, Mark, you're right. It's like that one comment can just put you, and that would put me into a tailspin. I lost sleep that night. I mean, she tagged my 3-star at Marcom. I don't even know if he goes on LinkedIn, but she tagged him. And, I'm sure he knows I have a podcast. I mean, I don't try to hide it, but it was just one of those things where, like, really?
Exactly right. It's the really.
Yeah.
But hey, well,
but hey.
You do weirdly get used to it, and you almost have to predict it and expect it, because then it's like, there it is. It's almost like if you do it expecting it, it's like, yep, tick, there you are.
And I try to tell myself I'm not doing a good job as an advocate, or I'm not really being compelling in my storytelling if I'm not being able to stimulate emotions. I don't try to do it to make people upset or to hurt people. But some people will go the other way, and they'll start name calling. I think I got called a racist on that post, or an anti-Jew, all these things. And I couldn't believe it. It was shocking, the lack of dialogue on that issue, because it's current, it's war, it's sensitive. I get it, but I still think it's a thing that we ought to have discussions about. Not saying that, one way or the other. I'm not very educated on this issue, but when a Department of State employee of 11 years speaks out on this, I think it's worth listening to and at least
100%.
understanding his point of view. Um, but yeah, it can be tough. And I think you got to have a really thick skin to be an advocate.
You
Wouldn't you
definitely
agree?
do. I mean, mention the simplicity of campaigning. I think it has to be so, you have to be so focused. And as I say, your mission statement can't be more than 2 sentences. One, ideally, you know, I want to do this. And on that subject, you have to have a solution that's workable and practical. If you're campaigning, you can't just say, and we see this a lot as well, you can't just say, that's bad, that's awful, that's terrible, stop doing that. You have
Yeah.
to say, that's not brilliant, so this would be better. And a lot of people, and I still can't get my head around, a lot of people haven't got a solution or
No.
don't see that a solution is part of your campaign.
Right.
It's not about, you know, just ranting and finger pointing. It's about going, this is the solution, and it's workable and it's practical and it's achievable and it's legitimate. So that's another thing. There's so many sort of, as I said, there's so many moving parts to a campaign, but there are definitely, I'd say, the three main ones that don't change are the tone, providing a solution, and just the simplicity. Has to be simple and really not to compromise, because you get pulled in all directions, usually by vested interests, people who shouldn't really be pulling you in different directions, but they're influenced by other vested interests. So yeah, you've got to be quite patient and play the long game, as we've said, but it is, as long as you stick to your guns and those main, and then you've got to decide, what sort of campaign are you? Are you trying to change the law? Are you trying to raise awareness? Are you trying to change public behavior? Are you trying to do all three? So again, the tools you use and the resources you have determine what actually you're trying to do. What you're going to be happy with at the end of it. So yeah, it's the word campaign. I mean, it's fascinating. It can apply to so many different things. Yeah.
And to be honest with you, Mark, it goes into every single person who works in public relations could take a chapter or a piece of this book, and they could use these same concepts and these same tools just in trying to get an idea across. For an example, we have somebody I'm working with right now who's trying to advocate for a different structure for how we do public affairs and strategic communications and all these things and within our staffing. And it's such a long fight, but if you to try to change an ingrained structure. But he's doing all the things that you're talking about. He's getting consensus. He's put together a point paper. He's put together slides about these things. I mean, he's doing all the things, and he's repeating his message over and over again in different formats to different people. And so I think that one of the ways that even public relations and public affairs and, you know, all these kinds of people that do marketing and other things, they could learn so much by just taking up a cause and being a campaigner, because you can do some of this stuff in your off time, and it can, like what I've done. And I believe, in fact, I know it has made me a stronger communicator in my workplace because of what I do off duty. So I think that that's another thing too, is that these skills that you're talking about, these can be done with parenting. I mean, you can take this and apply this to so many other parts of your life that will make you a more persuasive and influential person.
Like I said, the word campaign can apply to your life. You know, your life in a way is a campaign. Maybe being a parent is a type of campaign. It's a journey where you have to overcome certain difficulties and obstructions to end up with the solution, which is, I don't know, happiness or a family or whatever you want. But it's weird when you drill down and you start analyzing. It's like you can apply this, as you've quite rightly said, to anything really. And now we're seeing, I mean, corporate social responsibility was kind of a buzzword in the 90s. You know, brands doing something nice, digging an allotment or giving a proportion to charity. But now we're seeing kind of the evolution of brands taking on campaigns, brands getting behind campaigns. So the public don't want to just see a brand giving to charity. They want to see a brand that's maybe campaigning in Westminster or doing something active to help a vulnerable population, whether it's animals or people. So, the intelligent, forward-thinking brands out there are noticing that the customer wants almost to support a brand that's part of change and part of a solution, rather than, as I say, just giving a donation to charity. So that whole sector is evolving as well, because people are valuing campaigning, which also means that campaigning is now so accessible. If brands can get behind, they can share petitions, and they can host events in Westminster, and they can do all sorts of things that they couldn't do before, sponsor campaigns. So it's an exciting place to be. And I think that, as I say, it's one thing. When I was writing the book, I always wanted to write that book from when I started campaigning, because having minimal resources as a grassroots campaigner and not really understanding a lot of what I was doing at the time, and looking back going, that's why someone got so excited when we did that. I just wanted to put down all the tools that are accessible and usually free to everyone and anyone, so they wouldn't waste their resources, so they wouldn't do all the mistakes I made, going down sort of dead ends and getting to a point where we were like, we don't really know what to do next because we've tried everything. But as you mentioned quite near the beginning, imagination and creativity are probably your strongest assets as campaigning, because you have no resources or minimal resources, but you need to get noticed. So coming up with sort of PR events, either dog shows or silly things like a Crufts, which is the biggest dog show in the UK, having a giant Mothering Sunday card made 3 meters high, 2 meters across, with Lucy, ex-breeding dog who Lucy's Law was named after, in the middle, with Happy Mothering Sunday ? About the breeding dogs, getting that on TV, having a petition running that got 20,000-30,000 signatures in the next hour, also being endorsed by the TV show of Crufts. So that was a very simple concept that resulted in so much publicity. And publicity stunts, we did another one the year after to put pressure on the Welsh government. And we had Welsh Springer Spaniels. There's 150 that get judged at Crufts, half boys and half girls. So we arranged a flash mob of Welsh Springer Spaniels, all wearing a Lucy's Law rosette and a Welsh bandana flag. And a few days later, the Welsh government came out with a consultation. So again, and it got a load of press, and obviously it was incredibly photogenic. And there are things that everyone can do to be noticed. And you call them PR stunts, they are. But when they've got that sort of a real cause behind them, they're not just silly things that end up selling more products. They are really strategic events that actually help change the law. And that's definitely from my dad. I mean, my dad was a concept guy. He was creative in advertising. And what I love is sort of going, right, we need to raise awareness about that. And we've got that. How are we going to make it happen? And genuinely, to anyone listening, anything is possible.
Yeah, especially with the fact that we all have these social media tools at our fingertips. I was shocked last week, for an example, when I interviewed a guy who consults politicians, and he was telling me that just to run for office, you have to have, he said that in really tiny towns, you can maybe only have about $4,000 or $5,000, but in most campaigns, you need, $200,000, $300,000. And I just thought, how sad is that? When we do have access to all these tools, and unfortunate, and I maybe I'm an idealist, but I look forward to the day when politicians, you don't have to pay to play, where you can use these tools and this access, and you can do those events, and you can get that coverage. I mean, I keep my costs for podcasting incredibly low, strategically. And I advise people to do the same, because I don't want there to be a high cost of admission to do advocacy or to promote causes. And that is what I also love about your book, is that it is so accessible. Like you said, in the back of each chapter, you do these really, really good. I'll show everybody here these little checklists in the back, and I'll find myself, like I said, I actually bookmark certain parts of it, and I'll find myself just kind of going back to a certain section or something that I feel like I just need to reread, because it's easy to forget all these different concepts in here about getting the committees, knowing which committee. And again, I'm taking everything that you're doing, and I'm trying to put it in a U.S. lens. But democracies are somewhat similar in my mind, even though I know it's not a
Sure.
complete. So there's ways that I can relate this to U.S. politics, and even, like I said, even advocacy within an organization like NATO. I can say, oh gosh, there's a colleague of mine that wants to press this initiative, and how is he getting grassroots support? How is he doing this and that? And I support what he's doing as well. And I'm trying to figure out, we're all trying to figure out, well, what's the best way to make this work? So it is one of those things where this is something for everyone. And
Yeah.
it's so important that people understand that this is something anybody can do. I don't care if you have kids or if you have a job, you're a student, it doesn't matter where you work, what you do, what class of a person you are. This is a place for you within the advocacy world for so many different causes.
You just have to care enough about something to go that next step and do something about it. And as I said at the beginning, it can be something so simple like retweeting something or reposting something with a petition in it.
Right.
To meeting a parliamentarian, a legislator, as you call them.
Yeah, legislators.
In the States, or a PR stunt or an awareness event, or there's just so much out there that we can all do. And it all takes various levels of energy and commitment and time. And that's why you form coalitions with like-minded people.
Absolutely.
Who can bring extra skills in that you don't have. We had 5 or 6 people. We never overlapped one skill in 7 years, because we formed the coalition sort of 3 years into. Everyone was sort of campaigning on their own,
doing their own thing, and then you guys were like, "Oh, wait a minute, come together."
And it was fantastic. and some people sort of came in and went out, and some people just became closer than family. A lot of we still speak to each other. But back in the day, we didn't have sort of Google Documents, weren't as popular, or hadn't started yet. And there weren't the WhatsApp groups. Now it's even easier. Back then, and I'm talking 10 years ago, it was just email chains, maybe 50, 60, 70 emails a night after coming home from work. And how we coordinated it, as I say, we had different skill sets. I would front the campaign in Westminster, but I wouldn't go in there without my advice from sort of Linda, and evidence from Sue, and data and reports from Julia. But we all, a big word that my dad taught me, we all tessellated.
I've never heard that word.
It's we tessellated and we fit together, and we moved as one, and we supported each other, and it was tough because I think we all lost relatives even in that short time. I lost my dad, Sue lost her mum, we lost Philippa as a campaigner, Julie lost her dad. So it was we were all dealing with loss. And then of course Lucy, who the campaign was eventually focused around, as in Lucy's Law, she then passed away in 2016. So this huge outpouring of grief about Lucy, and she was quite a famous Facebook dog, let's say, one of the first social media superstars, had this global outpouring of grief. And that was one of the reasons why we called it Lucy's Law, because we harnessed that anger and that frustration and that sadness and grief from all these thousands of people, and said, right, let's give you lot a focus and something to get behind. And that's one of the reasons I decided to call it Lucy's Law, because it was almost, as you say, channeling that energy into good. And it was hugely successful, and definitely the game changer, because before that it was called the Campaign to Ban Commercial Sales of Puppy and Kittens from third-party dealers.
It's not personalized.
And you've fallen asleep by the end of the sentence.
Yep. So you have to personalize
by
the
calling
cause.
it Lucy's Law, personalized, has alliteration as a hashtag, has the most amazing backstory of this poor little dog who was incredible and brave and happy, and she made everyone smile around her, and her face in the brand and the Rosette, and it all came together. But I say she led the campaign, and us humans all just filed in behind her, and kind of, and we were sort of just kind of starstruck by little Lucy, even though she'd passed like a few months before. So there was a lot of strategy. There was a hell of a lot of creativity, but my coalition of 5 or 6 of us just didn't stop. We supported each other. We lived totally different lives in totally different parts of the country.
Sure.
But we were so focused on getting this through, and yeah, it still gives me goosebumps when I think about it.
It's a beautiful story.
What we achieved. Because the thing is, a lot of people realize this, but you probably don't in the States because you probably weren't following it at the time. We were against the government, obviously, because we wanted to change the law, and the government doesn't usually want to change the law, especially the civil servants, extra work, etc. We were against the pet industry because the pet industry thought, if you ban puppies and kittens from pet stores, it's going to be rabbits next, or gerbils, or mice, or amphibians, or fish. And these are big, obviously big selling animals, but they also create, they also create a footfall for pet stores. But what people don't realize, and you may not realize this, we were also against the 4 biggest charities, animal charities in the UK. So who we still believe had kind of vested interest in the pet industry, and they had commercial partnerships. So we were, as I say, 5 or 6 of us, one sadly passed, Philippa, with very little experience, especially political campaigning experience, up against the government, the whole pet industry. I mean, it's billions, plus these 4 big charities who everyone trusts. And we were like, how are we gonna navigate this? But we did, and we won. And the rest genuinely is history and law. But my message is, you can do this. Anyone can achieve stuff. You just have to be so patient. Another thing that's really important that I haven't mentioned yet is you have to be evidence-based. Everything you do has to be evidence-based. And I know we're going to talk about the Excel bully plan, which is the opposite of being evidence-based. But
it is.
It's I don't know. I now try and inspire, which sounds a bit like, oh, look at me. But I'd like to, that's one reason I read the book. I like to now help people on their journeys by going, maybe consider that, or maybe you should speak to these people. I love facilitating now. Someone will come to me with a problem, and I'll say, you need to speak to them, email intro, bang, off you go, play nicely. I can't wait to see what happens. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I love being in that position now where I've kind of not done it in an arrogant way. We did it the hard way, but the stuff I learned along the way, I can apply to so many different campaigns. So many different campaigners. And I love watching people make progress, because most people I know who are doing what they're doing and who approach me are trying to protect a vulnerable population, whether they're lonely people. I do a lot of work with human mental health now, or animals, obviously, or kids. I do a lot of school visits. So yeah, you can apply this to so many different vulnerable populations, not just animals.
Yes, and what you said about being evidence-based, I think that you're absolutely correct. You can have all the great PR skills in the world and do all these wonderful things, but if you don't have the evidence and the actual hard data to support the ask that you're pushing, it's going to fall on deaf ears. So I think that you're absolutely right. I love that you said in your coalition, you had that researcher, that person that could give you guys the data and could tell you the numbers, or could give you however many like in our case, the United States Department of Agriculture, they are supposed to go out and do inspections, and they were supposed to not be announced and all these other things. And they're not supposed to just give people kind reminders and whatever else they do. But there are people in the United States who track the puppy farms and how many violations.
The Humane Society of the US,
of the United States,
the horrible 100 that they publish every year.
Yes,
the work that they do is absolutely phenomenal. And you know what? Also, and I know them very well, John Goodwin, etc. From HSUS, but also the smaller charities who mop up the broken dogs, the shut down puppy mill dogs.
Yeah.
And I have to give a shout out to Finding Shelter, who are based in Pennsylvania, and Grace, bless her, she goes out into Lancaster County and she picks up these broken, shut down puppy mill dogs and rehabilitates them and gets them into rescue. So yeah, the bad guys who are creating this horrific mess, producing puppies for pet stores mainly, and then someone's got to go in and just look after these poor dogs after they've been exploited to the point of death or have been killed, as you well know. But that's why I know we were going to talk about this as well, but I've just made a documentary which was filmed half in England and Wales and half in America. And it's about puppy mills, and it's about campaigning, and we speak to 3 senators, and we went undercover, and I wore a wire in a few situations as well. But it should come out in February and hopefully on Netflix. And it's kind of about dog welfare, but it's also about what goes on behind the scenes of campaigning. And we hear from some, 3 MPs in the UK, 3 senators in the US, and a lot of campaigners, including HSUS, what makes a successful campaign, and tips for viewers about meeting a legislator, and how to make progress with your own campaign.
What's so beautiful about even in the US is that you can hold a sign practically in front of pet stores and it's legal. You can go to a pet store and be along a public sidewalk and set up a booth and educate. And it doesn't take much to organize Saturday for 2 hours once a week. I used to do it in Santee, California, and bring 4 or 5 people together and just use that as an opportunity to not only educate for those 2 hours, you put that on social media, you go live with it. You don't harass the people who work in the store. There's like you said, you don't get angry. You allow things to be peaceful and legal. I mean, those are all rights that we have that we should execute. I mean,
you've just got to care enough about it to do it.
Right.
And that's the bottom line really of any campaign. You just got to care enough. You've got to be stirred. You've got to be inspired. You've got to get angry.
Oh yeah.
We have a show in the UK, which I'm pretty sure you would have watched, called BBC Breakfast every morning. And BBC Breakfast is unique because what they do, it's a new show, but they're so good at getting campaigners on, and not just any campaigners. They are, in my view, they are experts in getting families that have suffered a bereavement or a tragedy, and 3 weeks later they're on the red sofa. They're talking about a petition. They're talking about meeting the MPs. They're talking about doing a walk across the country. They focus on campaigns that you can't believe what trauma these families have gone through. And now, as I say, 2, 3, 4 weeks later, they're sitting on the sofa. Now, one of the reasons, there's 2 reasons, I think. One is it's a distraction from grieving, which I genuinely believe is a powerful one. And also that people want to prevent that tragedy happening to anyone else.
Right.
So they'll do it. So again, it's part of the distraction, but they want to throw their energy into actually stop, raising awareness, blah, blah, blah. So, but it's one of those programs, one of those shows where you just think, how are these people who have gone through a child being murdered or something, immeasurable suffering, now on a TV show? And it's because, as I say, distraction and wanting to prevent and campaign that happening again. But I
read a book and I can't remember where I saw the research, but there's actually evidence-based research that's a key to resilience, that people are able to make meaning from it and make sense of what happened, and then use that tragedy and channel that into a cause. It actually, I can't remember where I saw it. I read a lot of books, but I did read a book where they talked about how that was one of the factors in helping people process their grief and move past it. What advice would you give to somebody who, like you said, you're talking to those kids at the school and they don't even know what they're interested in or what they want to do and what they want to get passionate about? What kind of advice would you give somebody in that position?
I think just find something that inspires. Find something that you think I want to do what that person's doing. And I think the sad thing is, well, I say sad, I guess there are success stories, but they want to be YouTubers and they want to be celebrities and they want to be, but because these are all, let's say, jobs, positions that they're being bombarded with, and that they see the successes, and they obviously don't see the failures, because no failure is going to have that sort of exposure or reach. But I don't know, there's just so many wonderful things to do out there, and to not know or be aware of any of them. I mean, I even speak to teenagers who don't know, which again is like, how can you not know by then? You've experienced quite a lot of life. But it's like, surely there must be something that grabs your attention that you want to do. But I guess it's the same as campaigning. You could say, as we said before, you apply campaigning to life. That campaign for your life could be to become a dentist or to become an architect. That could be your personal campaign. So it's if you care enough about something to want to do it. So if you care enough about something,
and to work at it. And I think that's the problem too, is that I can attest to my own self, as I grew up, feeling a little too sorry for myself and kind of falling into victimhood for a number of years. And I think when that happens, it diverts you from doing exactly what you're talking about, Mark, which is getting good at something, loving something well enough to stick with it day in and day out. And that's how I am now. I've gone 2 years now doing a podcast. I love this. I will do this even when I'm tired. I will do this when I don't feel like it after a long day at work. Why? Because I know how important it is. And I've been an advocate, and now I know what it takes to push causes forward and to lift people up through storytelling. So for me, I found that thing. And so I will do it even when I don't feel like it, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. And I think when you're in victimhood, or you're consumed, like you said, by social media and all these things that aren't, you see these influencers that then you think that that's what you can just do to become famous, is look pretty on camera. And that's not real life. And real life is getting into the muck and grit and doing hard work over and over and over again, and messing up and falling on your face, getting back up. A lot of people, I think sometimes don't really get over themselves and are not maybe given the mental health treatment that they need, and the right person to hold them accountable, and the right therapist that will call them on their shit in a nice, friendly, and supportive way. And so a lot of times those things don't happen. And that's unfortunate with a lot of young people, or even people, like you said, that kind of get into a rut, which is normal and we all do it. But it is an amazing feeling when you find what you love and you're passionate about it.
And it's right, and it should be satisfying. It should tick that box. You should wake up in the morning and want to do it. I mean, there's always going to be sad days or bad days or days that you don't feel like doing it. But on the whole, if you're contributing in some way to either society or to making people's or animals' lives better, that should sometimes be enough to keep you fulfilled, right? So again, it's a commitment. You hear people that do 1 year at university and then they change their course. I mean, if that, which is fine, of course. So if that mentality was sort of filtered down to kids, like, you could try something, if it doesn't work, just do something else. Rather than, there's so much, I'm not going to do any of it because I'm overwhelmed with choice and options, which I think is sometimes part of the problem. But as I said, it's that's what makes us all individuals, I suppose.
Yes. So, if people would like to know more about, we forgot to talk. I want to address the Bully brand and just some of the initiatives that are going on right now in the UK when it comes to animals. And by the way, I also want to make one more plug for AppDog, the All Parliamentary Animal Welfare Group. I actually have a link. I can show the website here in just a second. But
the All Party Dog Advisory Welfare Group.
Yes. Thank you. Here, I'll show the website right here. So if you're interested and you live in the United Kingdom, and you'd like to be a part of this, it's an amazing organization. You meet quarterly, correct? And
we have about 4 or 5 meetings a year in Westminster. We have to have them in person. AppDawg, apdawg.co.uk. Even if you live in the States, you can sign up to our free newsletter, which I write every month.
And very
And
interesting.
yeah, and it's sort of news from the UK, news from abroad, sometimes news from the States, what's going on in Parliament, with all regarding obviously dogs. And we have meetings in Westminster that are usually, so for example, we've had 3 this year about dangerous dogs, dangerous, that situation. Why is it caused? Again, evidence, what the solutions are. We've had a meeting recently about the connection between, the link between domestic abuse, coercive control, animal cruelty. So again, now a bit of human welfare as well as animal welfare. We have one every December, Unsung Heroes. So now I invite 8 unsung heroes who are usually campaigners or small organisations, and give them the platform of the Palace of Westminster to talk about their campaign for 10, 15 minutes into a room full of other campaigners or charities. So again, facilitating stuff that would have been useful for what we were doing, but because I know how campaigning works, it's like, I'd love you to, I watch all these campaigns and I get tagged in everything. So again, I go, right, you 8
Yes.
times, come in, have 15 minutes, bring a presentation and inspire the room. And they do. And then we've done that for seven
I've been to
years.
2 of them and they're wonderful.
Yeah, it's really moving. And again, the grassroots stuff, we don't really have the resources. And there's one thing about these events in Westminster, it's a chance for anyone to come. And people think you have to be invited to the Houses of Parliament, or you need a ticket, or there's a waiting list. We can all go. So it's our Parliament. But to go to events where there's a real life MP, which sounds crazy, but when you're beginning your journey, you know, these guys, and they kind of still are celebrities in the campaigning world because they are the decision makers. Maybe a minister, maybe a big charity that's being represented by someone, but suddenly you're able to touch them and to shake their hand and to have a conversation and to swap email address. And this is a big deal because there's not many times in life, and certainly in your campaigning, where you can physically come face to face with someone that can really help make progress for what you're trying to fight for. And it's a lovely entry point, gateway, whatever you want to call it, to the next level, especially if obviously you're parliamentary campaigning. So yeah, I'm incredibly proud of it.
Yeah, I'm inspired by it too, because I think that anyone can do them. Like, it doesn't have to be an animal
And anyone can
organization.
come.
Yeah. But I mean, if you live in the United States and you want to start a coalition about human trafficking, you could do the same thing. You could bring together people who are experts on human trafficking and in certain areas. Like you said, your 6-person coalition, everyone had a certain part of that expertise. Bring them all in a room, have them talk to the public and educate people. It's such a brilliant idea. And then you have the hashtag, you have ability to take pictures of those things, to make notes. I noticed that at the one that I went to, I was sitting next to a woman who writes for like a dog magazine, and she was taking all these notes and recording. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. You invite some of the people that are very interested in that type of work. So no, it's a wonderful organization, and I highly recommend, even if you live in the United States, the newsletter. That's another, I get a lot of ideas from you, Mark. I told you I was going to be fangirling you, and I am. But the newsletter, I mean, I'm like, oh my God, anyone could do this on MailChimp and pull clips that are in their particular, passion area, put them together in a newsletter and educate the public on those issues. So
yeah, and the other thing about the newsletter, as well as the news stories, and I do as I copy and paste, and I always put links and stuff like that. It takes ages. It takes about 6 or 7 hours every month to do a newsletter. But another feature of the newsletter is the active petitions. So I share the petitions that I think are worth sharing. There's a lot of rubbish out there, but the ones that are worth sharing to again get people involved and do the bare minimum, really. Sign and share a petition, or just sign it. Takes 2 seconds. But providing that platform and facilitating change and saying, do you know what? You're all welcome. It's a free newsletter. It's free to come to Westminster. You don't need a ticket. You need to tell me you're coming for security reasons for the list, and for the attendance numbers. But I want to make it as accessible as I possibly can, because that was one of the first things that inspired me was going to these APPG meetings, these all-party parliamentary group meetings in Westminster, and feeling that you're part of it, feeling that you're in the same room as the people that are like-minded, sometimes the opposite if it's industry, but people who will at some point be responsible for the solution or making progress. And that's incredibly inspiring. And I'm keen to share that with as many people as possible, and show how not easy it is, but how accessible it is, and how possible it is. How possible, there you go, that's the word.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's truly what I got out of it, going to those meetings. And like I said, I can't be as involved as I'd like to be with a full-time job and the other things I have going on, but I can do something. And the something that I can do is attend those meetings when I can, take some pictures, do a couple posts about what I learned and my takeaways from those meetings, and really take on board what you're doing with the newsletter, with those meetings, with the way that you've educated in this book. That's another thing, is the book Be More Mosquito, how you can campaign and create change. This is an amazing book, as we've been talking about a lot of the show. I even like the fact that in the middle of the book, I've had this book now for almost over a year, and it's even starting to get kind of warm, but you've got this nice, pretty color section of different things that you did during the campaign. So just a really, really good book.
Thank you. And it would make the ideal Christmas present, really. I mean, if only Christmas was just around the corner, and people watching who knew people that wanted to change the world were just wondering what to get their loved ones.
What to get?
Yeah. If only there was something.
Only there was a book right here. So we have that, and then also people can find you on your website. I saw marcthevet.com, correct?
Marc, right? Marc with a C, marcthevet.net.
Oh, .net. Okay, here. I think I have it here.
.com was started by someone that I can't get hold of. So I recently set up marcthevet.net on GoDaddy, who have been absolutely brilliant in terms of simplicity. I'm such a technophobe. So now I can write newsletters from my AppDog thing, and I can set up a basic website. GoDaddy. Thank you for making it easy for idiots like me.
This is really easy. Yeah, very simple.
It's so easy. And it took a few hours just to get online. But I guess my point is, get involved, see what I do, contact if you need any advice. I mean, I still work as a veterinarian 2 days a week, so I'm wearing my scrub top.
That's what I was also going to ask you, is if you're remembering everything I meant to ask. So that was the other thing. So you still are a veterinarian and doing all this advocacy. That's amazing. So,
and it's worth, I just want to say as well, a big shout out to my work, who are Muse Vets. They're called Muse Vets, who are based in Haywards Heath, and my particular branch is in Rottingdean, which is just near Brighton. But we are fiercely anti-corporate, and we're very, very independent. So we prioritize, obviously, the animal welfare. We prioritize the relationship we have with our clients, but we also prioritize our community. So the school visits and the giving talks and doing little events, and just being approachable and not being all about money and how much can I make from this pet. It's a very different culture for me personally, and I'm thrilled to be in that environment where we're not sort of criticized for not upselling, or why didn't you charge that, or it's a very different. As I say, personally, I find it the best environment to be the vet I always thought vets should be. So when I was at school and working with the local vet, who on my weekends and school holidays, he was the same. He was very old school, symptomatic treatment. If it doesn't get better, just keep the conversation going with the client, rather than let's do everything when potentially it just needed an antibiotic injection to start with. So controversial, I guess that's me, but our clients and customers, and certainly our patients, certainly seem to appreciate it. So independent.
I love that, and it's true, because sometimes there is that feeling sometimes when you go to the vet that they're going to do a million different procedures, and then you don't know if they're the ones that really need to be done, or they're the ones that you might be getting upsold.
And on a campaigning level, weirdly, my worlds have come together, because the government in September have launched an investigation into corporate vet practice. So lack of transparency. You can be in a town in England where there's 3 veterinary clinics, offices as you call them, and they can all be owned by the same company, but you wouldn't know because the signs on the outside are all different. So there's lack of transparency. There's a lot of animals being dumped into rescue at the moment. Cost of living crisis, that's across the world. But
Right.
To be sympathetic to clients, to be able to have the freedom to go, do you know what, we'll do half a consultation this time, or you can pay next time, or clipping claws, off you go, you know. And just to do nice things and as I say, be sensitive to every single person that comes through the door is really important for me, and it's important for Julia, who runs the practice, and all our receptionists and nurses. We're all on the same page. It's a wonderful environment that is so prioritizes the animal welfare and the relationship between not just the vet practice and the client, but the vet practice and the whole community.
I love it. That's great. That's great. Is there anything else that we haven't addressed other than I know we were going to address the bully breed ban, but is there any particular campaigns right now that you want to speak to? I know where do we start? Right.
There's a lot, but at the end of the day, I mean, they're all in the AppDog newsletter, so there's an incentive to sign up for it. It's free. I don't know. I mean, we had this kept animals bill that was, you know, promised so much great legislation, not just for dogs, you know, banning live exports of livestock, banning primates as pets, pet theft reform, banning the import of dogs with cropped ears. And of course, the main one I worked on was to ban puppy smuggling, to make it illegal to import a dog or a puppy under 6 months of age, which I worked on a lot during the pandemic.
Right.
And the government promised and they promised and they promised, and they kept saying we didn't have enough parliamentary time, and they just dropped the whole thing. I mean, it was so much work in that, from all types of charities, campaigners, MPs, the public signing petitions. And
do you
really
know why
doesn't
it got
help.
dropped? Was it because of
it was
industry?
because there was a few amendments that would have most likely ended up in a debate about fox hunting. So it would have been anyway. They dropped it. It upset a hell of a lot of people, including myself, and then they said they're going to split it up into what's called private members' bills. So each campaign or each piece of legislation would have its own journey in Parliament. Didn't really happen. The puppy smuggling made a little bit of progress and then kind of fizzled out. It's just so disappointing, because in the whole scheme of things take years anyway. But those years when you're dealing with animals whose welfare is compromised, who are being treated badly, who are being imported, you know, puppies being sent hundreds of miles across Europe, a few years to them is their life. So every time everything is delayed, it's just prolonging torture, it's prolonging cruelty, and it's incredibly unfair. And we're meant to be a nation of animal lovers. And we're failing, in my opinion, at that. We would have been streets ahead if this legislation had landed and actually been passed. But we're kind of back less than square one.
It can't be revived by taking out that amendment?
No, we're past that now.
It can only be reintroduced. I don't understand. Like, can it be reintroduced?
Yeah, well, there's different types of bills, and we think that they can't be reintroduced now because we've had the King's speech, and that's now almost resets Parliament. So it's incredibly depressing. It doesn't mean we stop campaigning, but it means that, for me, one of the saddest things about it is, apart from all the animal welfare stuff, which is obviously horrific, the public who are signing and sharing these petitions believe in the democratic process, and so do we. And so when you have e-petitions, and this is actually quite nice leading on to our next point about the XL bullies, if you have e-petitions that hit the 100,000, get debated, are popular with the public and make sense and offer solutions, and that's ignored, the public are less likely then to engage with campaigns. They're less likely to sign stuff, to share stuff, and that level of engagement from the public just gets lost or is depleted. And you rely on that often to show chief decision makers how popular stuff is with the public. And if they lose faith and they stop signing and sharing, you haven't really got that evidence to show the decision makers, because they've ruined it. So again, you just got to keep fighting and keep stuff fresh and keep conversations going, because as soon as the conversations stop, either it doesn't matter anymore or you've cracked it. So
Well,
yeah,
there's going to be more incidences. That's the thing, though. There's going to be a major incident with puppy smuggling that's going to make the news. There's going to be a major incident with some other part of that kept animals bill. And so it's going to continue to pop up even without
yeah.
the campaigning. You know what I'm saying? There'll still be
Oh,
actuating
100%. It's
events
just
that
so
because it's
frustrating.
such a problem. So I can only hope that they'll find some way to reintroduce those measures, even if they have to do it as separate policies. Because believe it or not, I actually read the kept animals bill on my way here, and it was a pretty comprehensive piece of, I mean, it was like 60, 70 pages of different
Incredible,
legislations and different
incredible piece. Yeah,
and
so
different,
popular,
yeah.
and
And
we have the
it was
expression.
unfortunate to see that happen, because I
Yeah,
think
but
that could have done so much good.
you've also got a ruling party, the Conservatives, who have. There's been a lot of controversy in the last few years. They've upset a lot of people. Some of the behaviours, obviously, during the pandemic, have put a lot of people off, introduced doubt. So you think this kept animals bill, and we have a brilliant expression here called low hanging fruit, right? It would have, it just would have shown that they were compassionate, they were caring towards animals, and it would have been a huge sticky plaster put on the wound that they created themselves. There's a beautiful quote, the Gandhi quote, which is, "A nation is judged on how it treats its
Okay,
animals,"
yep.
which is, I think, also a metaphor for how the government treats the most vulnerable. So if a government is seen to treat animals well, people get a warm feeling because they think, okay, well, they're going to treat people well as well, us, the voters. So when they don't, I
Mhm.
think it puts a higher brick wall up than they can ever imagine, because you lose trust and you lose faith, and if you can't look after animals, then you're not going to look after people.
I
So
agree.
yeah,
There's
it
such
was
a
an
correlation.
amazing vehicle that they really should have seen cross the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, and so that transitions into how in the world, did this XL bully ban, I mean, we don't have, I think anyway, as many of the breed bans in the United States. I know they were a big thing in the '90s and the 2000s, and I think they've rescinded most of them. I can't say everywhere, I don't know for sure, but I know that even certain states, they've taken away, the ability to pass even those bans anymore, but it's just so sad to see what happened. I remember seeing all the news stories about XL, a bully, or a dog that looks like a bully breed, was attacked a child usually. But what is going on with that today?
You've got a petition that's over 600,000 signatures, which is almost unheard of for a government e-petition, of people not wanting the ban. You've got a government description now of what an XL bully is that could be applied to bull mastiffs, Great Danes, cane corsos. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's so much ambiguity because you can't,
right,
this is not a breed, you know.
right, right.
So it's another knee-jerk reaction. We know that doesn't work. And for me, the motive of the ban was to show that the Conservatives are protecting the people. So it's a vote winner. There's an election coming up. This is a really easy but pretty stupid way of getting public on board. And they could have done that with the kept animals bill. But now they're introducing this legislation. I mean, when they're saying on the guidelines, people can go and get their animal put to sleep and they'll get a £200 compensation. When
So
you're at that
awesome.
level, it just doesn't really leave a good taste in the mouth. So yeah, it's a mess. It's a disaster waiting to happen. God knows what's going to happen to the rescues. They're overwhelmed anyway. People are starting to abandon. They're not easy dogs to rehome. So yeah, it's a mess.
It's
100%.
very unfortunate, and I would only hope that it goes back to, and the sad part is it breaks my heart, because you're right, their animals are just going to suffer, and they're going to be the victims of this misguided and non-evidence based policy. But it kind of goes back to, as a leader, I always say sometimes you got to really break something in order for people to wake up and fucking fix it.
Yeah.
And
But
that's
the
what's
sad thing
sad.
is the government commissioned research that said the opposite, but they've ignored that. We had select committee inquiry and emergency one last month. They ignored all the evidence. They ignored all the experts. One person gave evidence that was completely false, and they believed them. So they believed the sort of the media-friendly sensationalization, but they didn't believe the people who actually had the honest evidence. So, and the solutions. And you've got to introduce licensing. You've got to introduce education. And it's true. All these breeds, the breed bans don't work. But it's to as we've said right from the beginning, you have to listen to evidence when you're providing a solution. And when they blatantly didn't, and it's on camera because the select committee exposed that, you just think, what's the point of anything, but what do we need to do? And sometimes you're dealing with decision makers that just don't want to be told what to do, because what they're doing is serving a different motive. It's not protecting animals or their owners. It's actually making them look popular, making them look like they're responding to something that they need to respond to.
Making them look like you're taking action.
Yeah, and that's something that it's very, very difficult to overcome.
Right. What is it that you recommend based on what you've seen in the animal advocacy world and as a vet? What do you believe really will reduce dog accidents and dog bites?
Accountability. Making people accountable. You need a gun license if you have a gun. So why not have a dog license if you have a dog? Obviously, every dog can bite. A lot of dogs bite their owners. A lot of dogs who bite their owners, Jack Russells or Frenchies, are much smaller dogs.
Sure.
And then there's, of course, you've got the dog on dog attacks as well. And sometimes it can be a little dog that starts a fight with a big dog. The big dog turns around and goes chomp, and the big dog and the big dog's owner get punished for it. So there's lots of different levels of who's in the wrong, who's in the right, but there has to be accountability. And at the moment, we don't really have that level of accountability. And that starts with a dog license.
Yeah, what would people do you need to do to have a dog license? Like,
well, this is the thing. So you'd have to obviously fulfill certain criteria. So in order to do that, you kind of need to regulate dog behaviorists and dog trainers to then have criteria that you can fulfill. So there's different stages, but without accountability, I just think you have these knee-jerk bans, and you don't really get to the root of the problem. Education, regulation of dog trainers and behaviorists.
You have to professionalize dog training. You have to professionalize 100%. That.
I mean,
as
you
a
or I
craft.
could get some business cards tomorrow and just say we're dog behaviorists and start charging people.
Right.
That's
not right.
It's dangerous.
It is.
So that needs to be addressed, but it's being ignored.
Right. And that's the baby step. The baby step is figuring out a way to, and I say the same thing last week when I had Dan Yeek on here, and I know we've gone way over the hour allotted. So appreciate anyone who's still with us. And I know this is a longer show, but I'm just so passionate about this subject, as I know Marc is as well.
Sure.
It is one of those things where I have to wonder. I had a dog person on my show a couple weeks ago, and I said, with the airlines, that's the place where you could put a baby step, because if you could somehow make a certain type of dog training, TSA approved. These are the TSA approved dog trainers who have come through some sort of a certification process. And they are the ones who can certify that these animals are safe to fly. We could maybe one day create a system where animals would not die in cargo. And we could fly with our pets. I mean, that's the concern that I have, even flying with Jada back to the States now. We're putting her on the Queen Mary just so that we can get her home safely. Because that's the one thing that we know will keep her safe, because we don't trust cargo. That's the bottom line.
And you're not the only ones. It's a question I'm asked a lot, and a few of the petitions I've shared over the last few years have been about that. Taking your pet into the cabin, because people don't want to land and then find a dead dog, a catastrophe that's happened in the hold. So there's so many things that need improving, but definitely the licensing, the regulation of dog behaviorists, education, There's so much that can be done to prevent
Right.
these issues happening for all dogs and for all owners. And yeah, it's just hard to make progress, but as I say, it's possible. And I think you're absolutely right. Something bad has to happen, maybe, for the whole thing to be reset,
for people to wake up and say, this isn't working.
And it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah,
obviously.
It shouldn't. But I believe that is a part of a campaigner's, sadly, it's the lot that a campaigner or an advocate understands all too well, is that the actuating events are a part of what you kind of have to jump on when they happen. And I believe that the XL bully breed ban is just it's a dumpster fire. And it's just going to explode. I know on Sunday there's going to be a webinar about it with a law firm. I think I saw an ad for that, and I'm going to try to.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah.
So I'm going to try to attend that, because I'm very interested in the legal side of this and how you can even attempt to enforce such a ban. But thank you so much, Marc. Is there anything else that you wanted to address that we didn't talk about?
We're both on the same page. We could talk about this sort of stuff for hours, because we both find it fascinating. But I think for people listening and watching, just to think about something that makes them angry or upsets them, and knowing that there are ways and platforms and vehicles and mechanisms and levers, whatever you want to call them, that can help make progress. And obviously for animals, or for any vulnerable population, that's a big deal. And there's that famous quote, saving one animal doesn't change the world, but it changes the world for that animal. And I think small steps, just doing everything you possibly can with the resources you have available, and you can't really ask for more than that.
Nope.
So follow me on Twitter, Marc the Vet. Twitter's the ultimate campaigning platform. Or it was. It's a bit rubbish now, because you don't have the reach if you haven't got a tick, and I refuse to buy a tick. But Twitter, if you follow me and follow people like Peter Egan and follow some of the S.O.S, you just can pick up so much campaigning tips just from people who are doing it. Hashtags and links and petitions. And again, the tone is so important. So start your own campaign, join others, find a coalition of like-minded people, locally, nationally, internationally, and just do it.
Thank you so much, Marc. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time. I just want to meet you very quickly backstage to say goodbye, but I'm going to go on full screen and close out.
I want to say thank you, Teresa, for your time and for being interested in my story, and just for wanting to highlight some of these issues, and hopefully maybe inspire people watching to campaign themselves.
I hope so too. I hope we've inspired a few people
to be more mosquito themselves.
To be more mosquito. Get the book.
We've created a load of mosquitoes, and in the book you'll learn why it's called Be More Mosquito.
Yes. All right, Marc, I'll meet you backstage here in just a second.
Sure.
Thank you all for taking the time. Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. I'll be with you guys this coming Tuesday. I'm going to have a motivational speaker and prior military member who is now doing a full-time, just doing amazing things with his business and many things that he's done. So I can't wait to bring him to you. But with that, I would like to say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a great night. Bye-bye.